Hello, everyone. Welcome to another quick learn session. Today we will be covering PowerPoint tips and tricks. My name is Tennille Fincham, and I'm a technology instructor with KUIT. With me today, I have Susie Johannes, another technology instructor, and my colleague who will be helping to facilitate today's session and will be helping to answer questions as you pose them. Just a little bit about this session's format. This will be a presentation style session, so most of the time I will just be demoing these tips and tricks. If you have questions along the way, we'll pause often, but feel free to pose your questions in the chat window as they come along. Also, if you'd prefer, you can unmute your microphone if you'd prefer to ask your question verbally instead of asking it through the chat. Also, many of you may have seen this, but I do just want to remind you that we are recording today's session so that we can post it on our website with the other quick learn sessions for people to view after the fact or to view again. If this is your first time joining a Skype for Business meeting, I just have a few tips for you here. The first is to make sure you maximize your window for the best viewing results. This will let you see as much of what I'm presenting as possible. Also, if you're not asking a question verbally, we do ask that you keep your microphone muted. This will help to cut down on any feedback that may be happening with open microphones. If you'd like to ask your questions through the chat, or if you'd like to see what conversations or questions are being asked, you can click on the chat message icon in the lower left-hand corner of your screen to view the current chat. And then finally, there is an option in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. It's under the view options, and you can choose the presentation view. And this, again, will just kind of increase your screen size to see what I'm sharing with you. All right, so with that, let me tell you what we're going to be going over today. So I kind of have three different portions of these PowerPoint tips and tricks. First, we'll be talking about laying out your slides. So here we'll be talking about creating slides from an outline in Word. We will be talking about creating slides using the slide master, reusing slides, duplicating slides, talk about sections and custom slide size as well. And then we'll get into some content tips. So we'll be talking about using animations, creating your own custom shapes, as well as creating default shapes if you find yourself creating the same type of format on a shape over and over again as you're creating your presentation. And then finally, we'll get into presentation tips. So we'll talk about a couple of ways to quickly start your presentation. We'll talk about how to skip to specific slides within your presentation. We'll talk about switching to a blank screen and how that can help you and your presentation. We'll talk about zooming in. And then finally, we'll end with talking about adding in multimedia. And really what I mean by multimedia is video. So we'll wrap up with that at the end. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into some layout tips. The first one that I have here for you is to create your slides from an outline in Word. Now this requires a couple of things. One, you have to start out in Word. So it does require that you get, your outline created in there. The other thing that it requires you to do is you have to use the outline view from within Word. So two things that you have to do there in order to successfully create your slides from an outline in Word. So let's take a look at what that looks like here. So let me switch my screen. Oops. What I have here is just a blank presentation. So I just went to File, New, and Blank Presentation. If you want to use an outline in Word, again, you have to start from Word. So I've actually already created an outline in Word. And let me show you what that looks like here. So this is a sample outline. It doesn't look like much when you're just viewing it in the regular view. However, as I mentioned, one of the key things here is that you have to click on view and choose the outline view in order to kind of construct this and in order to create something that PowerPoint will recognize. So essentially what you do is you'll type out, kind of the format of your presentation or of the course or whatever you're presenting. And then you can use what are called levels in order to give these more prominence or less prominence as you go along the slides. So here, if I wanted to change the slide master, I can advance this to a level 1, and that creates it as a higher level topic, as opposed to kind of like a bullet point below layout tips. So that's how you get this started in the outline view. What PowerPoint will do then is it will create a slide for all of these high level, level 1 topics, and then below that it will have the information or, kind of your bullet points, if you will, below that. So let me show you what that looks like if you want to create that within PowerPoint. So here, again, just a blank presentation. You'll select New Slide and then select Slides from Outline. And then you'll simply just select the outline that you have created. So here's my sample outline. I'll choose Insert. It may take just a few moments, but then you'll have a slide for each one of those. As I mentioned, the level 1 is where it begins to create those new slides with the bullet points that you have underneath below, or the level 2 topics below. So that can be a quick way, especially if you're already starting out on Word, to kind of build your outline for your presentation or your course. All right, so let's get to some more tips here. Let me switch back. All right, the next one that I have is to use the Slide Master for consistency. So the Slide Master is really great for a few things. One, it's really great for adding a logo to the same spot on every slide. So as opposed to copying and pasting and trying to get the logo or a text or a title in the same place every single time, you can use the Slide Master, place it once, and it's going to be in the same place on every slide that you insert, whether they're existing or whether they're new slides. It's also a really good place to add a specific background color, or if you want like a specific texture or a specific image on every single one of your slides. Also really good for using the same font and font styles throughout your presentation. So if you have specific colors that you want different types of fonts to be, this is a really great place to set that. And then finally, essentially what we're doing with the Slide Master is creating your own template with backgrounds, logos, and different font colors. So let me take a quick look at what that looks like in order to get to the Slide Master and some changes you can do there. All right, so we're back at that blank presentation here. To get to the Slide Master, you'll click on View, and then you'll select Slide Master. Now, what the Slide Master has here is a list of all the different types of slides you can add. So by that, I mean, usually when you do new slide, you can choose whether you want a title slide, whether you want kind of a 2-column layout, whatever sort of design in the background you want to create your slide. Now, if you want something to filter down from the top down to every single slide, no matter what template of slide you choose, whether it's a title slide or a 2-column slide, you're going to want to make changes at the highest level here. So here we have a 1 next to this, and that's going to filter down to all the slides below that and any new slides that you add. So make changes at the highest level here, and that will filter down. Okay, so a couple of things that we can do here. I mentioned that you could add a logo. So all you need to do is click on Insert and Pictures. And here I can browse my computer to select a photo. So here's a logo if I wanted to add that. Choose Insert. And then I just need to place it on the page where I want it to go. So here, I could resize it. whatever I wanted to do and just place it in the image. If I wanted to create a specific background, again, starting at the highest level of the slide, you can right click on the background of that slide and say Format Background. This allows you to choose a specific solid color, or if you wanted a picture or a texture fill, you can do that from here as well. There's several textures for you to choose from, or you can insert your own picture from a file that you may have on your computer. Notice that when we're making these changes then, because we're making them at the top level, everything below that, then it gets applied the same texture on the background. And in the corner, you can slightly see where that Jayhawk logo would be on every slide. Okay, the last one that I mentioned was being able to change the font styles. That is done by this fonts button here. So fonts. And then here we can say customize fonts. This allows you to create your different heading fonts, or if you wanted to cycle through, your different fonts for the hyperlink is a good one, things like that. So you can change all of that information here through your fonts. The other place you can change information is through colors, and you can say customize colors. This lets you change the one specifically that usually is one that needs to be changed when you're messing with the background color of slides are these hyperlinks. So I could change all hyperlinks to be shown in red, and once they've been followed, show in white, or whatever I wanted to do here to match kind of the theme that I'm building. So you can select a specific font to be used for headings, and you can select specific colors. Probably the most popular one here is the hyperlink, because if you change your background colors, that blue doesn't always show up. So 2 things there that you can change. I'll go ahead and choose save. And then once I'm done here, all I need to do is close the master view. The slides that I already have in my presentation, those changes are applied. So I already have the background color here on each one and the Jayhawk. And then when I add in new slides, just by going to new slide, I can choose any of these options, sections, title sections, to content, whatever I choose is going to have the background color and then also that logo applied to it already. So that's the slide master. Really helpful for building these consistent looking slides and not having to rearrange things all the time. Now I do want to mention, if I wanted to change the location of this Jayhawk, I do have to go back to view and slide master in order to change the location or make it larger or whatever you want to do here. Those changes do have to be changed in the slide master. All right, so let's get on to the next tip here. The next one here is to reuse slides. This is really helpful when you've already perfected a slide in the past. So if you've already worked really hard to build information about contacting you, about the opening or closing slides, anything that you want to keep consistent, this is really great to do that. So you've perfected it once. You don't have to reinvent the wheel with perfecting it again on another slide. And as I mentioned, this is a good one to use if you want to keep consistent opening and closing slides. So let's take a look at how that works. So let's get back to my blank presentation here. So here, what you can do, it's under new slide again, and there's the option here that says reuse slides. So I'll click reuse slides. This allows you to browse your computer. So browse, file, and I can select a specific presentation that I want to reuse slides from. So I'm just going to pop in here and we'll use this one and choose open. This is going to show you a list of all the slides that are currently in that presentation. And I can simply just, double click to add it to my new presentation and rearrange it as needed. The nice thing about the reuse slides is that it takes on the template that I already have created in my new presentation. So, this one I may have to do some changes with colors, but really not a whole lot of changes. And I know that the information there has already been perfected or vetted or corrected for any sort of reason there. So reusing slides is a good one. Now you can do the same thing by just copying and pasting. If you want to copy and paste, you have to have both presentations open. And then one thing I do want to mention here when you're copying and pasting, once you paste, so I'm just going to do a Control C and then right click here, your paste options, you're going to want to select use the destination theme because that will update it to your new settings that you've made through the slide master or wherever. Otherwise, it will use the theme of your previous presentation and you'll have to go back through and make changes with that. So that's just if you're copying and pasting. If you use the reuse slides, you don't have to worry about doing anything special there. It should paste over for the most part in your new sort of format that you're using. All right, so that's reusing slides. The next one here is to duplicate slides. This is great for creating an exact copy of a slide. The really nice thing about duplicating slides is that it keeps even all of the animation settings for the slides. So this presentation was a good example of when to use duplicating slides. I have these sort of light bulb animations on multiple slides of this presentation. So I perfected it once. And then I just duplicated that slide so I didn't have to spend a whole lot of time going back through and adding the animations to every single object. So that's a really good example. When you duplicate a slide, you can go back through and edit it independently of its original copy. So I can go back through and add different text, but still keep all the same animation settings or anything else that I have going on there. So let's take a look at that here on this blank slide. If I wanted to duplicate, let's say this slide here, I can simply just right click and say duplicate slide, and this will create a copy right underneath that. Again, I can edit them independent of one another, but if there were any animation settings or anything within the slide, they would be duplicated as well. There's a question there. I am going to show you how to do the animation settings. So when we talk about I think it's in content / the presentation ones, I'll show you how to set up the animations and some tricks for that because it can be a little bit tricky. You're welcome. All right, so that's duplicating a slide. Let's take a look at the next one here. This is using sections. So sections can come in a really useful way. If you have multiple presenters for a presentation, you can create a section of slides for each presenter to work on. If you have multiple sections or modules of the presentation, or even if your presentation, if you have like a morning session and then a break and then an afternoon session, you can create sections of slides for that as well. Or if you have just an hour of a meeting and then a break and then another hour, whatever that may be, sections can be really useful. And then the other thing that they're helpful for is just organizing in general a large presentation. So you have a lot of slides to go through. Creating sections can help you visually see less of them that you may need to work on. Okay, so let's take a look at that. All right, so when you're ready to create a section, you'll simply right-click on a slide and say Add Section. This creates, by default, an untitled section right above where you right-clicked. So if I wanted to add another one here right above slide 4, I want to right-click on slide 4 and say Add Section, and that will add another one. Essentially what this does is it partitions off the slides underneath. You can rename the sections by right-clicking and choosing a rename. So maybe this is like part 1 of my presentation. And rename. And then maybe this is part 2. So rename part 2. Now, what's really nice about this is that you can collapse these now. So now if I know that I'm done with part one, I don't even have to visually see these slides any longer. I can just go directly into part two and start presenting. This can also be nice for if you have a long presentation like I mentioned and you want to kind of deliver it in sections to your audience. You can collapse the slides that you no longer need, that you've already viewed or that are to come later, and just view the ones of that particular section. This can also be quite nice for multiple presenters. You could create a section for each individual, and then they would kind of know what slides that they would need to work on and what slides you're going to work on, that sort of thing, to have their own kind of space to work on their slides and information. So really helpful there. The other things that you can do by right-clicking, I can remove the section if I no longer need it. That just removes just the section, so my slides are still retained. There is an option here to remove the section and slides. So if you're going through your presentation and sectioning this out and you decide that you no longer need to cover the information in part 5, you can remove the section and its slides all at once. And then if you're done with sections altogether, you can remove all the sections and not affect your slides in any way. So really good, as I mentioned, multiple presenters, long presentations, and if you have multiple modules or portions of your presentation or course. All right, so let's switch back here to the presentation. The last one here that I want to talk about is the custom slide size. This is good for a couple of things. One, if you're used to working in PowerPoint, it's really good for creating handouts. The other advantage of creating a handout in PowerPoint is that, Word, we're so used to working in such a linear fashion. PowerPoint, you don't have to work, in a linear fashion in order to create the handout. I'll show you an example of what that can look like. And then the other one here was just creating a slide size to match where you will be presenting. So if you have like a large screen or a smaller screen that you're presenting on, or whatever that may be, if you want to print out stuff for a billboard or whiteboard that you're teaching on, I don't know, then you can create your own custom slide size to be able to have something more than just a standard. So let me show you how to change it, and then I'll show you an example that Susie and I use for our handouts here. Okay, so if you want to change your slide size, you can go to the Design tab, click on Slide Size, and then you'll choose Custom Slide Size. There are some pre-built ones in here, so if you know that you want to do like a letter paper, an 8.5 by 11, you can select that as a pre-built-in size here. This does, just to mention, this does put an inch margin around the entire document, so it actually gives you a size of 10 inches by 7.5 that you can extend all the way to the edge of that slide because it's already built in the margin for you. The other thing that you'll maybe want to do here is for your slides, if you are doing a handout, portrait maybe better than landscape, and then you can click OK. So I'm going to click cancel here because I want to show you an example of the handout. So Susie and I actually use this for all the handouts that we create for courses. So we've just set a custom slide size here, and then it's really easy to be able to manipulate and move information around as we need to, delete information, add in images, all that kind of thing. And again, it's nice because we can do it in a non-linear fashion to create and kind of move and place information on the handout. All right, so that brings me to the end of those layout tips. Are there any questions over any of these? All right, so I'm not seeing anything. Oh, maybe a question in the chat. Yep, I'll send a copy of this PowerPoint out with the follow-up email. And I'll also send the link to the recording of this as well. You're welcome. Oh yeah, questions once you get to your presentation and kind of moving with it. Cool. All right, so I'm going to move on then to talk about some content tips. So we've talked about laying out your slides, kind of setting up the scene here to add in information. The first content tip that I want to talk about, and this is maybe something that you wouldn't need to do on every single slide or for every single presentation, but this can be a good one to know, just to kind of have in your back pocket, and that is to merge shapes. So when you do an insert shape, you get a selection of just the standard shapes offered. So there's ovals and there's rounded rectangles and lines and so on and so forth. When you do the merge shapes option, it actually allows you to create your own custom shape from those standard shapes. So just as an example here, I created this light bulb as a merged shape just using the circles and rectangles within PowerPoint. So especially if you're used to kind of working with that, it can be a good way to create some more custom things. So let me show you really quickly how I created this light bulb. Typically, one of the things that I always do when I'm creating a more complex shape is I find on Google Images just an image that looks kind of how I want my final one to look like, just so that I can have sort of a model to go off of. This can also be helpful because you can actually trace, kind of around this model and create your own custom shape. So that can be helpful as kind of a thing to trace. So for this light bulb, what I did, I had my template here. I went to insert, shapes, started out with a circle or the oval. To create a perfectly perfect circle, you'll hold down the shift key while you're dragging, and then that allows you to create a perfect circle. So let me just make this a little bit smaller here so you can see what's going on. So that looks pretty good here. In order to create sort of these angled edges, then I just went to insert again, shapes, and I used the rounded rectangle. And just created just sort of a random one here just to start out with, and just lined this up as best as I could. So that looks pretty good. Control C, Control V to copy that shape, and just kind of move this around, doing this really quickly, so we'll see how this comes out here. So that doesn't look too bad. And I'll just create, oops, so this last one here. So this is pretty close. I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but the advantage of creating kind of these merged shapes here, again, we can create our own custom one. Essentially, you can see what the final product of this is going to look like if you highlight all of your shapes that are combined here and come to the Format tab and remove the shape outline. So you can kind of see what the final of this is going to look like and make any adjustments as needed. Sorry, this keeps switching on me. Now, the advantage of creating this merged shape is that, if I wanted to add an outline back to this, if I wanted an outline to be around this light bulb shape, I could select all of the shapes that make it up. However, it's actually going to add an outline to each of the individual shapes. So let's see here what one shows up. This white was pretty good. So here we have an outline on each of the individual shapes, and it looks really kind of crazy for this particular light bulb. So instead, I'm going to remove this again and show you how to merge them. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the shape outline. And then on the same format tab, there's this merge shapes option, and you can do a union. So you can combine all of these together. So a union that creates just one shape on its own, and I could add in a shape outline and it would go around just that shape on its own and not the individual ones that make it up. So again, maybe not something you would use for every single slide, but definitely a good one to have in your back pocket if you need to create something more sophisticated than the shapes that are offered by default. Okay, so let's take a look at the next one here. The next one that I have is to duplicate shapes instead of using the copy and paste commands. Now you can absolutely use the copy and paste commands. The advantage of using the duplicate is that while you're creating a copy of it, you can also align it at the same time. So you kind of save yourself a step. There is a keyboard shortcut for creating the duplicate, and it's just you need to hold down Control while you click and drag the shape or the text box or whatever object. So let me show you how that works. Here, if I wanted to create a copy of this light bulb to use, again, I'm going to select the object, hold down Control, and then click and drag. You'll also start to get the alignment tools. It's a little hard to see on here, but there are some alignment things that happen as I'm clicking and dragging so that I can go ahead and line this up at the top and at the bottom while I'm copying it. So that can be a good advantage of doing the click and drag. It also saves a little bit of time because you don't have to do Control C, Control V multiple times. You can just stay using the mouse to create the copy. All right, the next one I'm going to talk about here is creating a default shape format. So sometimes when we're creating presentations, we have a certain look that we want all shapes to be. So if we're making a circle on multiple slides or making a bounding box on particular sets of information, we want that all to look the same, and it can kind of get frustrating to have to constantly do a no outline or change the outline to red with a higher point percentage or something like that. And that's where creating this default shape format comes in handy. It allows you to add the same format to any shape that you would create from the Insert tab. So let's take a look at that so I can show you how to set the default shape. So let's go back to our information here. Now the first thing that you have to do, let me just get to a blank slide for us to use here. The first thing you have to do is you have to create a shape that has the formatting that you want. So I need to come to Insert, Shapes, and I'm just going to create a circle here. So with this circle, then I need to come to the format and I need to choose whether to have this filled or maybe this is a no fill, and we'll add the shape outline of 6 points, and maybe we'll change the color of that to be, I don't know, black. That's fine. Okay, so once you have your shape looking the way you want, you can right click on that shape and say set as default shape. So set as default shape. Now when I come to Insert and I choose Shapes, even if I choose like this rounded rectangle and draw this out, this is going to have the same format as my default shape, so it can really save you some time if you're creating the same kind of look and feel for all the objects that you're adding to a page by creating that default shape. The other way to kind of achieve the same thing is to use the format painter. This is really good for copying and applying the format of shapes or text and other objects, there is a keyboard shortcut for this. I'll also show you another way that you can use the Format Painter. The keyboard shortcut for this is a Control plus Shift plus C for copy, and then a Control Shift V for paste. And this copies and pastes just the format that's applied to text. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'm going to come up to one of my layout tips here. Let's change this to be red, and maybe we'll change it to also be underlined. So again, you have to format something the way that you want it to look. And then here, I'm just simply going to select the format that I like. I'm doing a Control Shift C to copy the format. And then I'm going to come down to my next title here. I'm going to select it and do a Control Shift V, and it will paste that format. Now, the nice thing about using the Control Shift C and V is that it stays on your copied clipboard. So I can move to multiple slides at this point and apply that just by doing the Control Shift V over and over again. So that's the nice thing about doing it in that way. Now, the other way that you can do this, you can select the format that you like. On the Home tab, there is the Format Painter button. So Format Painter, and then I can come to a slide and, highlight this, and it will change that as well. For Mac, in the presentation, I believe it would be a Command Shift C and a Command Shift V, but I will add that into the presentation for the Mac keyboard shortcuts. Most of the time for Mac, it's Command instead of Control, and PC is a Control instead of Command, but I'll add those in. Cool. The other thing here with the Format Painter, if you forget the keyboard shortcuts, you can double click on the Format Painter, and that allows you to use it multiple times as you're going throughout your presentation. So lots of options there for the Format Painter, but definitely a good one to keep another, consistency as you're going throughout, and it saves you some time. Okay, the other one that can be really important as you start to add more and more information and objects and text and shapes to your slides is to use the selection pane. This can be good for a number of things. One, it allows you to see a list of all the objects that are on your slide. It allows you to reorder the objects really quickly, really easily. It also allows you to select specific objects very easily. It's also good for viewing only a portion of the objects. So if you have multiple things going on your slide, so if you have animations or things like that, you can view only a portion of the content and work with just a little bit of it at a time. Let me show you what that looks like here for this selection pane. And I'm going to skip down to this one. And I'm just going to create just a few more copies of this. And I'm going to copy some of this stuff over too so we can take a look at all of this together. Okay, so let's say I have all this on my slide and I have animations for all of this, which I will show you later. And I want to change the order of the objects or just be able to select, this background object easily, something like that. Here, if you come to the Home tab on the ribbon and choose Select Selection Pane, this is going to open the selection pane along the right-hand side of your page, and this is going to list all of the objects that are currently on there. Now, by default, it gives these sort of light bulb looking shapes. These are just called freeform because we merge shapes together. If you use the shapes from the Insert Shape tool, it's going to say like oval 12 or rounded rectangle 13. So not very explicit, names for what these objects are. You can, if you want to, you can double click in here and rename the objects. So this can be helpful to kind of keep your bearings and make sure that you're applying animations and moving the right information around. Another really good one here is that you can choose this hide all command, and that hides everything on the slide. Now, if I wanted to work just specifically with that rectangle object, I can click next to that just to view this object, and I can make modifications to this. I could add animations to this, whatever I would need to do, but it kind of narrows down what I'm working with, which can be really great if you start to have a lot of things on your slides. So that's the selection pane. The next thing I want to talk about here are animations. So this slide deck in particular has quite a few animations in here. They're really great for adding movement to your slides. They're also good for showing only a portion of the slide content and kind of revealing it in layers, kind of like what I'm doing here. We're focusing just on one tip. We don't have a lot of other distractions on the slide from previous items, so that can be a really good way to present content. So let me show you the animations here, and then I'm also going to show you the animation pane, which is helpful. So let me switch to the blank slides here. Okay, so let's work with this rectangle. Let's say that we want this to just kind of fade into our slide as I'm having, kind of the light bulbs do the same thing. Here, if we choose animations, what I always turn on first is the animation pane. The animation pane is going to be right next door to the selection pane, and this is going to be really helpful to see what you have going on, the order that it's going on in, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so here, if I want this to fade in, I always use this add animation tab. We have entrance effects that we can give this. We have emphasis effects, and then we also have exit effects that can be applied to the shapes. So if I want this to fade in, I need to use this entrance effect of fade. This is going to preview it for you just to show you what that looks like. But I can also go back, sorry, I don't know why this keeps switching. I can also go back and I can say play all here from the top, and it's going to play all of those so I can kind of see what that interest effect is. Now, if I want this to also fade out of the slide at some point, here I could do add animation and also choose a fade for the exit so I can apply those multiple ones to the object. So here in the animation pane, what we have is an entrance, which is the green, for it to fade in, and then we also have an exit applied to this object. Now, as you start to get more and more objects with animations, you're going to want to use the selection pane and the animation pane sort of together. So let me show you what this sort of complicated one looks like. So I have a copy of my presentation from today to show you. And certainly they don't always get this complicated, but this one just happened to be that way. Okay, so this is a slide just viewing it. If we're looking at this slide and we're trying to apply to animations, we're trying to even see what's going on, this can start to get really confusing, right? Because everything's just sort of overlapping. We don't know what to select. We don't know what has animations on it. So two things for sure here that you're going to want to do. One, you're going to want to do animations, animation pane, so that you can see the animations that are going on within your slide. This slide in particular has a lot of animations, and looking at this would probably make my head spin just looking at all of these together. So the other thing that I always suggest to do, or that I like to do, is on the Home tab then click on Select and choose the selection pane. Now, if you're good about naming your objects, this can come into handy as well. Here, I could choose Hide All if I wanted to work with just one individual light bulb, and I can start to turn on just some of those objects in layers. So I could work with just light bulb 1 and the slides from outline, and then I have the bullets underneath. So here I can work with just a portion, and it makes it much more manageable, not only on the slide, but also take a look at your animation pane, much more manageable with just a few objects, as opposed to what we were seeing with all the objects with their animations. Now, the other thing here that I want to show you about the animations is that you also have additional options here. So if you select an animation along the side, there's a small drop-down arrow. This allows you to say whether you want the animation to start when you press the spacebar key or the on click, or you can have it start with the previous animation or after the previous animation. You also have some effect options here and timing if you want to get really particular. Most of the time, I do the on click so that if I talk longer than what I've projected, or if I don't say quite as much as what I've projected, then I can control when those animations or when those bullet points come in. If you want the effect to be longer, you can come to the timing here. You can delay it. You can add the duration to be longer than 0.5 seconds so that it fades in over the span of 5 seconds if you wanted it to be really dramatic and slow to get something across or something like that. So lots of options you can change in the animation pane there. And the big tip here is really just making sure you have the animation pane showing and the selection pane showing. All right. Any questions over those content tips? All right, so I'm not seeing anything rolling through the chat, so I'm going to keep going here, and we're going to move on to our presentation tips. The first one that I have for you is to start your presentation with a keyboard shortcut. So when you open up your slide deck and you're ready to present, you can actually just press F5 and it will get you in presentation mode. But the bonus tip that I want to add here is that if you don't even want to have to worry about opening up your slide and kind of fumbling around to get it in presentation mode, you can save your presentation as a PPS or PPSX. This is just the slideshow option. And once you double click to open this, it automatically opens up in slideshow view. So you don't even have to worry about pressing F5 or, kind of figuring out how to start your presentation. So two things there, F5, and then also if you want to be really slick, you can do the save your presentation as a PPS or PPSX. All right, the next one here is to use the keypad to switch to specific slides. This one is really good, except you have to remember the number associated with your slide. So as you're looking at your slide deck along the left-hand side, you have to make note of the number that's next to it. However, this can be really helpful to switch to a slide that maybe has contact information that you're looking at often, or if you're referencing the objectives of your course often, or if you're referencing the presentation outline. So let me show you how to do that. Essentially, all you have to do is press the number associated with the slide. So mine is a 5, and then press enter, and it will move to that number of slide. So here, we could talk about what we've covered so far and talk about where we are in the presentation tips. When you want to get back to where you just were so that you don't have to click the forward button and go through any animations and all of that kind of stuff, you can actually just right click on your slide and say and choose the last viewed option, and this gets you back to where you just were before you switch to that next slide. So this can be a really helpful one to keep, as I mentioned, switching back to course objectives or a presentation outline or content information, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, the other one that's really good is to switch to a blank screen during your presentation. This can kind of help to refocus your audience, or if you need to really have them focus on what you're saying as opposed to an image on the slide or something to that effect, you can black out your screen or white out your screen. It also is helpful to have a less distracting background if you're showing items that may not take up the entire screen. So let me just show you how to do that. Essentially, all you need to do is press the B key to get a blank black background, or the W key to get a blank white background. And then to turn this off and get back to your slide, you can just press the W or the B again, and it takes you right back to where you were just presenting at. So that's a good one to keep in your back pocket as well if you need to focus your audience in on something, on what you're saying or something like that. Another good one here is zooming in. This can be really great for calling attention to just really specific portions of your slide, or if you have something like a graph or a map or an image that you have more intricate details on, you can use the zoom command in order to call more attention to that. So you can actually get to the zoom command while you're in your presentation. You just need to move your mouse a little bit to kind of activate it. Then that activates these presentation tools here at the bottom. They're a little bit grayed out. And there's a magnifying glass. So you'll select the magnifying glass. It kind of shows you where it's going to zoom in on, and then you'll just click, and that will zoom in on just that portion of the slide. So a really good one for calling attention to intricate details or portioning off just a little bit of your slide to show. Here you can just press the escape key, and it takes you back to your entire slide. All right, the other one here, probably not something you have to use very often, but sometimes it can be helpful, and that is to hide your cursor during the presentation. So, oftentimes once I start to move my mouse again, my cursor is visible, and it does take, just a few moments for it to kind of be invisible again. So if you don't want to have that whatsoever, you can use a Control H to remove the mouse pointer. So I can do a Control H, and I'm moving my mouse now, but you can't see the mouse on the presentation. So that is an option. And then you do just need to do a Control H again in order to show your cursor. So that can be a good one as well. Okay, last but not least, we'll be talking about adding in multimedia, and really here what I'm talking about is adding in videos. So you have a few options. One, if you have the video on your computer somewhere, right? So you have like the MP4 or whatever video file here. One option is that you can embed the file into their PowerPoint presentation so that it's actually stored in the presentation. The pro of this is that you don't have any lost videos because it's stored in the presentation. The con is that you're adding a video file to your presentation, so your presentation file can get very large very quickly. The other option, if you have this video file on your computer, is to actually just create a link to that file. Now this is stored outside of the presentation. The pro to this is that it does create a smaller presentation file size. So if you need to email this, if you're saving it somewhere, something like that, this is a good option. The con is that because we are creating this link to the video, those links can break. I will give you a tip to keep in mind as you're creating these link to videos, but just keep in mind they can break pretty easily if you're not aware of that up front and kind of plan for that up front. The other option is that you can add online videos. You can embed them into your slide, or you can search PowerPoint to add them. Okay, so let's take a look at that. I have a PowerPoint presentation here to show you what that looks like. So here, if you needed to add in a video, I'm just going to do new slide blank. If you need to add a video in that you have from your computer, here we're just going to go to Insert, Video, Video on my PC. Next, you'll just browse your computer and select a document to add. Now, if you're embedding this file, remember embedding it stays with the PowerPoint slide and it's going to increase your file size. Once you select your video, you'll just choose Insert. If you're creating a link to that file, under Insert here, there's the option to link to file. So that's what you would choose to add the video from your computer. Now, a tip for if you are linking to video files from your PowerPoint presentation so that you can keep the size down, create a folder to begin with for your PowerPoint presentation and your video and store both of those in that folder. It makes it a lot less likely because you'll probably move the entire folder around as opposed to moving just the PowerPoint slide on its own. So it can help to minimize having those links break. Okay, and then the last one here is to insert an online video. Here I have that inserted on the slide. To do that, I just said video, online video. You have two options. The first is to search YouTube. So I think I just did like PowerPoint tips and tricks and hit the search button. This allows you to then select and insert a video, which is what I did. The other option is to use a video embed code. So sometimes on YouTube, and this isn't for all videos, but sometimes the videos will allow you to get an embed code from the share options. And in that case, you can add that embed code by going to video, online video, and pasting the embed code here. And it's going to look pretty similar to this. You can change the size of this video, so on and so forth. One thing I did notice when I was sort of playing around with this video is that on the playback, I changed the start to be on click as opposed to automatically, and then that allowed me to have more control over when the video was played during my presentation. If you want to see a preview of this video beforehand, you can right click and choose preview, and it will show your video for you. And then once you start your presentation and click, you'll have the ability to play. Okay. So I have just a couple of last tips here about the videos. One, again, remember if you are going to be linking to videos, be sure that you save the video file and the PowerPoint file in the same folder. You can kind of think of it as like packaging your presentation in a way. And the other thing that I want to mention here, if you're presenting online like I am right now, it's actually best to copy and paste the link to the video like in the chat message window here and have people watch it independently as opposed to trying to show the video through your PowerPoint presentation. So just a tip there on that. Okay, so with that ends the presentation tips. Are there any questions over any of these? You're welcome. I'm glad that it was a good kind of overview as to what could be done within PowerPoint. All right, so I'm going to include some keyboard shortcuts as well. I'll double check on the Control+H to see if it doesn't unhide it. For the mouse pointer and send that in the follow-up email. I'll also send the keyboard shortcuts, as I mentioned, for PC and Mac for those sorts of information for starting presentations, copying and pasting, all of that. I do want to mention, if you thought this was helpful, if you want to do this for your department or any of our other training, we do offer departmental trainings for small work groups. We also have open workshops and also this quick learn webinar series. And then finally, if you're working on a particular job related task in a program, you can contact us for some desk side coaching on that specific problem that you may be having. We do have one last quick learn session coming up for the fall semester. That's going to be on December 7th. Susie will be talking about Photoshop basics for the web. And then once we come back from the holiday break, we will have more sessions coming up for the spring 2017 semester. And then just the final thing here, I'll send a link to the recording in my follow-up email. I'll add some additional learning resources like those keyboard shortcuts, and then I'll also answer any outstanding questions. So with that, thank you all for your time today. I'll hang around for a little bit after the fact if you all have any more questions. But that ends today's session, and have a great lunch hour.